more than a year ago to, as Mario Draghi, the bank's president, said, do what it takes to preserve the Eurozone. That has swept away a lot of the most extreme anxieties that were around in financial markets and the Eurozone economy more widely. And gradually it's beginning to inject a bit of confidence and a bit of activity back into the business community. But it's slow. What these figures are pointing to is continued recovery, but still not particularly strong.
And France is a key weak spot in these numbers. What's happening there?
That is really striking. When we had the economic growth figures for the second quarter of the year, France was actually a positive surprise with an expansion of 0.5%. These figures look a little bit more consistent with what people thought, that France is certainly better than it was in the real doldrums earlier this year, but certainly not growing all that strongly. And these figures do indeed suggest that there is more work to be done to get the French economy growing decisively once again.
Okay, the BBC's Andrew Walker in London. Thanks very much.
My pleasure, Mark.
And let's do the numbers. Stocks are up in global trading. In Europe, they're reacting to the strong numbers we talked about a moment ago with Andrew. Germany is up about 1.1%. Stocks in France around 1%. Asian markets largely closed down today. Hormel Foods, maker of Spam and other meat-inspired food-like products, is reporting weaker than expected earnings this morning. Yesterday on Wall Street, the S&P dropped 0.6%. The Dow lost 0.7, closing at 14,897. Mexico's president is making big moves to end the decades-long monopoly of its state oil company, Pemex. This has major energy implications on both sides of the border. That's the topic for today's conversation with our friends at Univision. Stephen Keppel covers economics there and joins us from Miami. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
Good. So this could potentially be one of the biggest economic developments between the U.S. and Mexico since NAFTA back in the 90s. How could this all impact energy prices in America if this goes through?
Yes, this is definitely a big deal for Mexico. You know, they're sitting on huge reserves of oil and gas, but they're just not able to produce it. You know, Pemex, the national company, is old and inefficient and poorly run, and some private investment and foreign expertise will help them out. What will this mean for the U.S.? I mean, I think combined, it's going to make North America a real energy powerhouse, rivaling Saudi Arabia. It'll be cheaper to transport oil and gas to companies in the U.S. I think globally, we might see a reduction of prices, and it'll give, North America, U.S., Canada, Mexico more independence when concerning energy issues.
Now, this is not a done deal. The government oil monopoly in Mexico, very large, very powerful. How likely is it that the president will be able to get his way on making this kind of historic change?
That's really an interesting point of all of this. This would be a historic change. They've got to change the Constitution. But it seems likely that it's going to happen. There's going to be some protests from some of the leftist groups and some unions. But the majority of Mexicans seem to be in favor of this really big reform. And I think that says a lot about the Mexican government and the Mexican people. They're really ready to move forward.
So you think Mexico's lawmakers will make this happen? In the U.S., though, lately our Congress doesn't have a very sparkling record as far as getting big things done. You seem to be saying Mexico's politics are working in a way America's aren't.
Well, don't get me wrong. The Mexican government has loads of issues with inefficiency and corruption. But recently, under the new president, there's been a huge reform drive. They've made reforms to education, to telecoms, and it seems like things are getting done. A lot of people were skeptical, but the parties are working together. They're moving things through Congress. And when you compare it to the United States, it's a big contrast, and it's kind of surprising. Like I said, a lot of people look at the Mexican government and see obviously the problems with corruption and inefficiency. But, hey, they're making some things happen, and you got to give some credit to them.
Okay, Stephen Keppel at Univision. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
In Detroit, they're pushing through mountains of paperwork for the city's bankruptcy proceedings. The money problems that led the city to file bankruptcy create a whole different problem, crushing bills from its bankruptcy lawyers and advisors. Top-flight legal and financial firms have managed to make an awful lot of money from companies and governments that are underwater. Ann Hepperman reports.
Going broke isn't cheap. Take Lehman Brothers. Their bankruptcy fees topped $2 billion, so yeah.
It can get very expensive.
David Skeel is a bankruptcy expert. He says plenty of bankruptcies cost millions of dollars. One reason? No one wants to speak up.
Nobody that's actually in the case wants to rat on somebody else and say, your fees are way too high.
Skeel says more companies have decided to fold rather than deal with bankruptcy costs. There's also more oversight. This summer, the Department of Justice updated their guidelines to make bankruptcy fees more transparent. Nancy Rappaport has been a fee examiner.
I'll call up the professional, say, tell me why you made this choice. Sometimes it's a great choice. Sometimes we talk about a reduction in fees.
Rappaport's seen stacks of fees taller than she is, and she's 5'2". She says oversight is essential.
If reasonable fees aren't being charged, then there is something wrong with the system.
Companies and now cities need clear eyes to see if bankruptcy is their best financial hope. In New York, I'm Ann Hepperman for Marketplace.
You can find us anytime until the end of time at marketplace.org for more stories, and you can have your say there as well. In New York, I'm Mark Garrison. This is the Marketplace Morning Report. This is APM, American Public Media.
And we're 36 minutes into the program, 24 minutes away from 10 o'clock Central Standard Time. Time for a review of yesterday's stock market report. Here in the United States of America, U.S. stock markets ended lower Wednesday after the Federal Reserve showed no clear sign of when it plans to begin drawing down its bond-buying stimulus. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 105 points to 14,897, extending its string of losing days to 6, the longest since July 2012. The S&P's 500 index dropped 9 points to 1,642, and the NASDAQ Composite Index lost 13 points, closing at 3,599 units per share, or rather 3,599 shares. The Fed appears on track to slow its bond purchases by the end of this year, should the economy continue to improve, but it remains divided over the exact timing of the move, according to minutes from its July interest rate meeting. A few policymakers said they wanted to assess more economic information before deciding when to scale back the central bank's $85 billion a month treasury and mortgage bond purchases. These policymakers emphasized the importance of being patient. The minutes said stocks have slumped since August 2nd, when the Dow Jones and the S&P 500 closed at all-time highs. Traders have been worried about weak earnings and have been looking for clarity on how and when the Fed will wind down its bond purchases. In other economic news this morning, the National Association of Realtors reported that sales of previously occupied homes jumped to an annual rate of 5.35 million in July from 5.06 million in June. Home sales rose to their highest level since November 2009. Walt Disney said it will begin laying off about 175 people in its Disney ABC television group, about 2% of its unit's workforce. Reuters reported, citing a person familiar with the matter, most of the layoffs will come in technical operations such as broadcast engineering and at 8 ABC-owned stations across the United States. But the ESPN cable sports operations isn't included in the cuts. Disney shares ended yesterday down 1.2% to $61.14 per share amid a broad market sell-off. And more stocks in the news. Staples shares slumped 15.3% to $14.26 after the company reported weaker than expected quarterly results on dismal sales in international markets and cut its outlook for the year. Target warned its annual profit may be near the low end of its forecast as consumer spending remains cautious, sending shares down 2.5% to $65.50. PetSmart dropped 5.3% to $71 after its results, while American Eagle Outfitters tumbled nearly 10% to $14.76 after giving a weak outlook. But home improvement chain Lowe's rose nearly 4% to $45.81 after it reported a bigger than expected rise in profit and sales as the housing market's recovery encouraged people to spend more on their homes. Shares of Toll Brothers have ended virtually unchanged at $31.65 after the largest U.S. luxury home builder reported a jump in revenue as the recovery in the housing market gathered pace. What to watch for today? The Labor Department releases weekly jobless claims. Did so at 7:30 this morning, and hope to have more details on that coming up tomorrow. At 9 o'clock this morning local time in the Central Time Zone, Freddie Mac reports weekly mortgage rates, and the Conference Board releases leading indicators for the month of July. And these major companies are scheduled to report quarterly corporate earnings today. They include Abercrombie, as well as Dollar Stores, GameStop, Gap, Hormel Foods, and Sears Holding, just to name a few. And that's today's market information for this Thursday. More of the program coming up in just a moment, so stick around. You're listening to First Cup. It is Thursday, August 22nd, 2013.
This September, our state lawmakers have the opportunity to make history.
Because for the first time in nearly 100 years, Missouri can stop spending and start growing.
By returning a budget surplus back to Missouri taxpayers.
And let Missouri families spend their money better than politicians.
Because we need to grow our economy, not the size of government.
Tell our state leaders 100 years is long enough.
Visit growmissouri.com to learn more.
Stop spending, start growing.
From the moment we are born, society feeds us ill-placed values of a thing called gender roles. The idea that a man has a specific place in society different from that of a woman. Boys are given toy trucks and army men to play with, while girls get baby dolls and dresses. But are they any less of a boy or a girl if they wish to play with the opposite? And as adults, these stereotypes only worsen, from specific dress codes to hairstyles, to jobs and even hobbies. We are constantly being told by the media and by our peers what we should and shouldn't do according to our gender, or worse, what is expected of our sex regardless of our gender. These ideas are outdated and even dangerous. No matter what we choose to do, like, or wear, we aren't just a gender, we're a person, and that's what truly matters. We do not become subhumans who deserve ridicule if we step outside of our cliches. The only way to get rid of gender stereotyping is to educate ourselves, learn how far these injustices go and how they hold back societal growth, realize what part of our habits are harmful, and be brave enough to make a change. Because our change starts with you.
Dag nabbit.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Schlemiel, Schlemazel, Hassendampf Incorporated.
We're gonna do it. Give us any chance, we'll take it. Read us any rule, we'll break it.
Oh, that takes us back, doesn't it? Laverne and Shirley. Oh my, I haven't seen that show in donkey's years. All right. 17 minutes in front of 10 o'clock in the Central Standard Time Zone. And we'll get to news headlines in just a few seconds. Wish to remind you, though, if you are looking for some great custom-made jewelry, Native American style, my friend Chris can help you out. It's true. Just go to facebook.com/WishingStarsNative Creations, and Chris will be able to set you up with unique, one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry. So do it now, do it today. That's facebook.com/WishingStarsNative Creations. Do it right now, okay? It's as simple as that.
I said, oh, Lord Jesus, it's a fire.
Hello, Americans. This is Paul Harvey. Stand by for news.
And it's time for a quick check of news headlines. We'll have more details on the CBS World News Roundup in just a moment. Bradley Manning sentenced to 35 years in prison. Army Private Bradley Manning was sentenced by a military judge yesterday to 35 years in the slammer. He is responsible for the largest leak of classified information in U.S. history. Manning's legal team said they have post-trial legal maneuvers planned. Manning will have time 1,294 days subtracted from his sentence for time served. The family of Hannah Anderson's kidnapper requests DNA test. The family of kidnapper James Lee DiMaggio is requesting his DNA be tested against kidnapped victim Hannah Anderson and her 8-year-old brother Ethan. The family says that DiMaggio had an intimate relationship with Hannah's mother, Christina, who he is suspected of killing. along with her 8-year-old son. DiMaggio was shot and killed earlier this month by FBI agents who were rescuing Hannah Anderson. And a German tourist dies after a shark